liquid for electronic cigarettes. This is a very simple process that allows you to have complete control over your liquid. You can customize it to your own taste and control how much nicotine, throat hit, and vapor production you get out of your liquid. I'm going to demonstrate how to make one of my favorite all-day vape flavors, strawberry banana. There are many ingredients I use to make my liquid, which are all primarily found online. In the description below, I will provide links to the exact ingredients I used for this flavor. Vegetable glycerin is an organic liquid that is the vapor base in e-liquids. It is very thick and produces all the clouds and vapor in your liquid. It's naturally sweet on its own and has no throat hit and can be used as a flavorless liquid. Propylene glycol is used as the base in most flavors. It's a very thin liquid that produces very little vapor, but gives the liquid a strong throat hit and is the carrier for the flavor. The nicotine that I'm using today was purchased at a local vapor store, sold as a flavorless liquid with a very high nicotine strength. This has been working well in my recipes, but you can also purchase other nicotine bases that are much stronger and available in 100% PG or 100% VG bases. The strength of the nicotine I'm using today is 24 milligrams per milliliter, which means for every milliliter of liquid, there are 24 milligrams of nicotine. The flavors I'm using are from the Flavor Apprentice, which is one of my favorite flavor vendors. They are a PG base and contain other ingredients such as ethyl alcohol and water. Try to avoid any oil-based flavorings or flavorings with diacetyl, which can cause breathing and asthma-like problems. The link to their online store will be in the description below. I like to use graduated cylinders for my mixing, but you can also use a blunt needle syringe for accurate measurements. I use the 10 milliliter for small batches and the 50 milliliter for larger batches. Disposable pipettes are handy for transferring the liquids. They hold roughly 3 milliliters of liquid and have notches on the neck that measure in quarter milliliter increments for accurate measuring. Funnels of various sizes are necessary for getting the liquid into the bottles. I prefer glass bottles with dropper caps for all of my liquids. They come in an amber or blue tint, which helps keep out the light so the liquid is not damaged and the nicotine is not degraded. The glass is easily recyclable and better than plastic bottles, which tend to absorb flavors. When making your liquid, there is a bit of math involved, but luckily there are calculators online that make the process much easier and streamlined. I like to use the Steam Engine e-liquid calculator, which I'll provide a link in the description below. First, you enter the batch size that you want to produce, which today will be 15 milliliters. Next, you enter the nicotine strength and what ratio of VG to PG the nicotine base is. The nicotine I'm using today is 24 milligrams per milliliter, and the ratio is 75% VG to 25% PG. Then you pick what target nicotine strength you are aiming for. I like to keep my strength pretty low at about 3 milligrams per milliliter. It's good to know what strength you prefer beforehand, but try to start low before using higher nicotine levels. Otherwise you can get bad headaches and feel sick. After you enter everything into the calculator, it'll give you a breakdown of how much nicotine, VG, and PG to use to make your flavor. But it doesn't factor in your flavors. This is an important bit that is up to your own discretion. Flavor recipes are expressed in percentages, which means the flavor will be a certain percentage of the overall size of the batch that you're making. For example, today I'll be making a strawberry banana flavor, so the recipe for the flavors I'm using will be 10% strawberry and 3% banana. Percentages are important for scaling your recipe to different batch sizes, so the flavor strength is the same. If you find a flavor is good at 10%, then when making a 10 milliliter bottle, you will put 1 milliliter of the flavor liquid. A 15 milliliter bottle will require 1.5 milliliters of the flavor liquid, and a 30 milliliter bottle will require 3 milliliters of the flavor liquid. A good rule of thumb when trying to make new flavors is the 5% rule. Whenever you use a new flavor, test it in a small batch at 5% with no nicotine, so you get the full effect of the flavor. This is a good jumping off point so you know if you want it to be stronger or lighter. Here's a breakdown of the recipe I'll be mixing today, expressed in percentages and the exact milliliter amount. I found that I like this ratio of strawberry to banana flavor since the banana flavor is stronger and can overwhelm the strawberry. Now if you remember, the numbers that the calculator gave are a bit different than the recipe that I'm showing. First I rounded off the numbers that the calculator gave since I won't be able to measure exactly to 1/100th of a milliliter. The flavors I'm using are PG based, so they'll be counted as part of the PG portion of the recipe. Since the flavors make up 2 milliliters of the juice, this is subtracted from the PG portion. The nicotine I'm using is a mixture of both VG and PG. Here I've broken down the PG and VG content of the liquid I'm making. You can see that it's an even ratio of 50% PG to 50% VG, which is the target ratio that I'm going for. 50% VG to 50% PG is a good basic ratio for most vapors. It's good for tanks and clearmizers since it's fairly thin, has moderate cloud production and throat hit. This is a good middle ground for most vapors. I prefer to make my liquids at 90% VG to 10% PG. This is a good mix for rebuildable atomizers, which produces a lot of vapor and has very little throat hit. As you make your own flavors, you'll find your own preferred ratio of VG to PG, depending on how much throat hit and cloud production you like. It's good to experiment with these ratios. Remember, the more PG, the more throat hit and less vapor. More VG, less throat hit, but more vapor production. To begin the mixing process, I'll be starting with the flavor liquid. Using the pipette, extract 1.5 milliliters of the strawberry flavor. When measuring with a graduated cylinder, it's important to look at it at eye level so you can see the meniscus. If you remember chemistry class, the meniscus is the curvature to the liquid in the container. It curves upwards around the edges, so measurements must be made from the bottom of the meniscus. Since this cylinder only measures in fifths of the milliliter, I'm going to eyeball the 1.5 milliliter mark. Using a new disposable pipette, extract half a milliliter of the banana flavor. Add the half milliliter of banana flavor to the cylinder, making sure to get the bottom of the meniscus to the 2 milliliter mark. Now it's time to add the PG, VG, and nicotine to the batch. I use small dropper bottles for the VG and PG, which make it easier to add them precisely. I'll start with the nicotine. Add 2 milliliters of nicotine to the mix. You can see the liquid separate a bit as you add the nicotine. Measure the liquid to the 4 milliliter mark at the meniscus. Next, add the VG. I'm adding 6 milliliters of VG to the mix, which will bring us to 10 milliliters exactly. You can see how dense the VG liquid is as it sinks to the bottom of the cylinder. Now that we're at the 10 milliliter mark, we're ready to dump this into the bottle. Using the funnel, I'll pour this portion of the mix into the bottle. Make sure to hold the cylinder for a little while so you can get every drop. Finally, it's time to add the PG. You can see right away that the PG is very thin and flows almost like water. I'll measure this up to 5 milliliters and then add it to the bottle. Pour the PG into the bottle, which should bring the mix to the neck. Hold the cylinder for a while to allow the liquid to drop. Now you're finished mixing, and your liquid is all set, but it's not ready to be vaped just yet. As you saw during the mixing, the liquids are at different densities and need to be blended together. You can put on the cap and shake the bottle around to blend the liquid, but I find this to be pretty tiresome and have an alternative method for blending the liquids. I like to use my drill with a clamp to hold the bottle and give it a high-speed spin. I find this works very well, and it's also pretty fun. It's good to do this periodically to the liquid. I do it about once a day when I make my e-liquids. Steeping is the most important process in making your liquids, and there's many different methods. Warm water baths are one method many people use to steep their liquids. This is a candle warmer, which will warm the water but does not boil it. This will make a warm bath for the bottle to sit in, allowing the ingredients in your flavor to blend together. You can also do it without the cap on, allowing the flavor to breathe. Breathing is important because certain flavors, like the banana, has ethyl alcohol, so it's important to allow that to evaporate out before vaping. It may take several days for the ethyl alcohol content to evaporate out, so make sure you give it time. It's also important to note that warm baths and breathing your liquid oxidizes the nicotine content. This causes the liquid to turn a darker color and the strength of the nicotine diminishes. The best method for steeping your liquid is to give it time. Keep it in a dark area where it won't be exposed to direct sunlight and allow it to sit for at least a week. You'll find the more time you give your flavors, the better they come out. Now that you're familiar with the process, go out and experiment. Try out different flavors and see what works best for you. I've been making my own flavors for a while, and it's been a very rewarding process that's also saved me quite a bit of money. It's good practice to keep track of the recipes you're making. I use a spreadsheet to help keep track of everything I put into a recipe. So if a flavor comes out particularly well, I can make it again. And if I didn't like it, I have something to go off of so I know what to change.